Pokémon Stadium is the hardest Pokemon game, and I know you're gonna say, oh, what about Colosseum? No! Pokemon Stadium, specifically on the Nintendo Switch Online, is the hardest Pokemon game ever. Why? Because the whole point of the original is to import your own Pokemon to help beat the game, a feature that does not exist in this version. So you are stuck with the rentals, which just are terrible. The fully evolved Pokemon typically have horrible movesets, where their pre-evolved counterparts have all the best moves but such low stats that they can barely survive. So I've decided I'm going to beat this game with only the rental Pokemon, a task that has been described as masochism, but not without some help. I'm going straight to the source for this, the official Nintendo Player's Guide from Nintendo Power, which tells you exactly which Pokemon to use and in some cases, how to use them. Without any further delay, this is the hardest Pokemon game ever, exactly as intended. Now, if you haven't played this game, here's what we need to do. We have to beat the Stadium section with 10 different cups, each cup having 8 battles and varying degrees of difficulty. Then beat the Gym Leader Castle, where you battle against the Kanto Gym Leaders, Elite Four, and eventually your rival. Once both of those are done, you face Mewtwo in a 6v1 brawl. We start in the Pika Cup, the entry-level competition only open to Pokemon levels 15 to 20, and your team of 3 cannot exceed a combined level of 50. The official guide wants a team of Raichu, Poliwrath, Arcanine, Executor, Drowsy, and Dratini. In the first match against Bug Boy, the only guidance is to use Drowsy and its psychic attack. I forget who I chose as backups, but it didn't matter. Drowsy got a clean sweep. Also, if you win a match in the stadium without losing a Pokemon, you gain a continue to use if you lose a match later on. In the second match against Lad, I brought in Dratini as a starter for his Fire Blast against the grass or flying types. That part is just wrong, and Fire Blast did not do enough against Farfetch for a knockout. And then they got to go first on the second turn, I'm assuming because of a speed tie, where his second takedown KO'd Dratini, who was not naturally resistant to Lad's arsenal. But with a rounded out team of Poliwrath and Drowsy, we cleaned up Farfetch'd, slept Ivysaur, and brought in Drowsy, who cleaned him up, and Bellsprout. The third opponent, Swimmer, sinks in the department of having a team with diversity in types and attacks. And as the guide says, Executor was able to single-handedly win. Fire types make up the bulk of Burglar's stable, where I was told to call in Poliwrath to rob him of victory. And as stated, Surf easily brought home this win. The fifth match against Mr. Fix is full of electric types, and Arcanine's Dig is perfect to short-circuit them. However, facing Raichu to start was a bit of a problem because they were faster and KO'd Arcanine after 2 Thunderbolts, which ultimately, after a paralysis, it was all wrapped up. I had 2 continues, but the second attempt was terrible. I mean, Raichu just waxed Arcanine and Drowsy. On my third attempt, Mr. Fix threw out Kingler first, so I switched to Executor. This didn't quite work out after paralysis, but did enough for Drowsy to finish off after getting paralyzed by Body Slam as well. Porygon came in and took down Drowsy in 2 hits while I got some damage in. 2 Embers from Arcanine beat Porygon, and Voltorb's Thunder wasn't enough to beat 1 Dig from Arcanine for the win. Hiker in the 6th slot had a wide variety on his team, and the guide didn't really tell you who to use except for having Pokemon that cover multiple types, such as a grass type. Executor got the start, who ended up completely dominating the entire fight against Rhyhorn, Wigglytuff, and Seadra. I started out with Dratini in the semifinal to use Thunder Wave and paralyze the big brute, but in reality, Tentacruel was faster and wrapped Dratini, then switched out to Arcanine. I tried switching to Poliwrath now, who took down Arcanine after a couple surfs. Raichu handled Dugong, but got KO'd to 1 surf from Tentacruel. Now at this point, anybody slower than Tentacruel was just useless because look at this. Wrap is absolute hell. You cannot move. You're just stuck until they maybe miss or just decide to do something else. Anyways, on my second attempt, Raichu got frozen, which pretty much ended any and all hopes. And the third attempt, I started against Arcanine. But after Poliwrath and Dratini went down early, Raichu could not perform a miracle and I lost, which meant I had to start from the very beginning. Yay! It took 30 minutes to get back here, and after burning 3 continues on the 7th fight, I was down to my last chance before yet another reset. Poliwrath surfed away Arcanine. Gyarados came in next, and after Poliwrath went down, Raichu's Thunder took him down in 1 go. 2 Thunders from Raichu beat Mr. Mime, and I was onto the Pika Cup final against Fisher with no continues. I was told to play defensively, with a key member of the group being Executor and a bench of Raichu and Drowsy. But in the fight, Executor got some damage in on Slowbro before they switched to Dragonair, who was simply unstoppable.
Savage attack! There, it's a hit! Oh! Is it down and out?
So that means we go back to the beginning, and another 40 minutes later, after barely getting through the semifinal,
The bear hit! He's hit hard!
I had one continue going into the last battle. I put in Dratini instead of Drowsy since I was able to choose my bench Pokemon. Dratini barely survived, but missed a Blizzard on Dragonair on my first attempt, resulting in a loss. So again, I am down to my last attempt. The start was strong as Executor beat Slowbro, then got some damage in and a huge crit on Dragonair before going down. Dratini again tanked the hit, but this time Blizzard hit. Although it still wasn't enough to KO, it was enough for Raichu to come in and take out Dragonair. It was a 1v1 with Raichu against Clefable. I used Seismic Toss because my Pokemon knowledge is low and I thought it would be super effective, but it only does a certain amount of damage each time. A Double Edge brought me close to defeat, and I needed a big moment from Raichu if I wanted to win.
Here it comes! Thunder! Powerful strike! Oh! Is it down and out?
The crit brings us home, and after 2.5 hours, I have beaten the very first Stadium Cup. Next up is the Petite Cup, only allowing Pokemon between levels 25 and 30, under 6 feet 8 inches, and weigh less than 44 pounds. The recommended team provided by the guide is Pikachu, Bulbasaur, Horsey, Sandshrew, Ghastly, and Dratini. The first matchup against Bugboy had us starting with Dratini for its Fire Blast, with reinforcements of Horsey with Ice Beam and Ghastly for its well-rounded abilities. The latter two were not necessary, as Dratini dominates the Bug and Grass Pokemon for a perfect run. Round 2 against Lad put Ghastly on the team as the anchor and recommended to enlist Pikachu, who I started with and who ended up sweeping Ekans, Bulbasaur, and Ditto for another perfect game. The only thing off-putting about Nerd's team in round 3 is that his Pokemon sport some ridiculously silly names. I was told to rely on Ghastly, Sandshrew, and Bulbasaur, and after Execute exploded on Bulbasaur,
The bear hit! Wow! Going down!
Ghastly Mega Drained the Geodude and had a Nightshade off against the opposing Ghastly for the win.
Oh! Is it down and out?
The Sailor in round 4 had mostly water types, and Pikachu ended up sweeping without the help of Dratini or Ghastly needed. The female junior has a fairly diverse team, but Ghastly is called in again, and after a nice crit on Growlithe, was able to sweep without the help of Bulbasaur or Horsey. The male junior in round 6 had a big mix as well, but Ghastly was able to sweep again with no help needed. Again, Ghastly started the semifinal against Lass, with backup of Sandshrew and Horsey. Ghastly battles through paralysis and double teams to slowly take down the opposing Pikachu, get a big crit on Clefairy after a few of their double teams, when Eevee came in last, who literally couldn't do anything on the ghost type. So after more sand attacks and 6.5 minutes of fighting,
Savage attack! Goodness!
Ghastly brought home the win. The final against the Pokemaniac called Horsey, Ghastly, and Dratini to the lineup. Horsey got some damage done on Nidoran, and after they switched out to Dratini, an Ice Beam froze him solid, guaranteeing this KO. Nidoran held on to an Ice Beam and cleaned up Horsey, who Ghastly was able to beat with a Nightshade. Earthquake from Sandshrew took down Ghastly, and it was down to Dratini. I used that annoying wrap strategy that got me in the last round to my advantage this time to chip away some damage from Fire Blast to come in and bring home the Petite Cup trophy. We move to the Poke Cup next with Pokemon levels 50 to 55. This cup has 4 different difficulty levels where we start with the easiest stage, the Pokeball. A recommended team for this level consists of Diglett, Abra, Staryu, Jinx, Magmar, and Jolteon. The first battle against Biker left him extremely vulnerable to Psychic, so I brought in Abra who swept away Hitmonlee, Machop, and Mankey. Rocker has a team of either electric or grass Pokemon, so Magmar got the start with backup of Diglett and Jinx, who the guide states I shouldn't even need. And they were right. Magmar took Bulbasaur, Diglett beat Magnemite, and Magmar came back for Oddish. I was told I need to juggle my Pokemon against the Juggler in round 3. I picked Abra for its Psychic attack and had Staryu and Jolteon as backup depending on who they throw out. Abra one-hit Hitmonchan, and I switched to Jolteon for Drowsy since that was what I was told to do in the guide. Jolteon instantly wakes up from hypnosis, but Pin Missile just is not a very good move at all. It does, however, eventually get the kill, and Jolteon Thunderbolted Clefairy away for a win. Jinx, Staryu, and Jolteon are tasked with handling Beauty's team. I found myself in a switch off as I switched out Jinx for Jolteon, leading to their switch to Rhyhorn, leading to my switch back to Jinx. A crit from Jinx took down Rhyhorn.
That one hurt!
and another switch to Jolteon beat Staryu and Shelter. Ghastly is the only otherworldly Pokemon on Medium's crew. We didn't need to go further than our starter Jolteon, who swept against Ghastly, Zubat, and Tentacool. Jinx is called in for round 6 against Tamer, with Staryu in the back ready for Hydro Pump against the fire types, and Thunderbolt on the French Squirtle, Squirt. A third Pokemon wasn't even needed as Jinx beat Sandshrew, and Staryu took Squirtle and Growlithe for the 6th straight perfect fight. The semifinal against Psychic had plenty of Psychic Pokemon to face off against, where Jolteon took the lead and ran away with it. Pin Missile took out Slowpoke, Thunderbolt beat Pidgeotto, and only one Pin Missile was needed to beat Abra for the 7th perfect game. The final was against the Old Man and had me bring out Magmar, Abra, and Diglett. The guide tells you what you're supposed to do against the normal types, Beedrill, or Magnemite. So naturally, the first Pokemon out is one not mentioned, Dratini. I stuck with Magmar Psychic, but they switched out to Seal, the other Pokemon with no guidance given. But I brought in Abra who handled him.
There, it's a hit.
Diglett came in to beat Magnemite and finished off Dratini for a perfect no KO Pokeball Cup. Now we move up in difficulty to the Great Ball, where I face off against the same trainers with the same kinds of Pokemon, however with an upgrade. I brought back most of the same team, switching out Dugtrio for Diglett and Persian for Magmar. The guide was spot on in the first fight. Abra came in and didn't even let an opponent get an attack off. Dugtrio got the start against Rocket and took down Magneton in 2 digs. I switched to Jinx for Ivysaur, but couldn't do enough to KO. Jolteon cleaned him up, then I used the Toxic Insane Attack strat to slowly take away Electabuzz. Now for some reason this guy predicts the juggler will use Hitmonlee, Poliwhirl, and Graveler, whose Staryu should be able to handle. Credit where credit is due, they got 2 of the 3 correct in Hitmonlee and Poliwhirl, who Staryu did handle. But Clefable came in and tried to win through Metronome, a strategy that just didn't work. Staryu is the ideal candidate in the 4th match against Beauty, since Hydro Pump can handle the rock and ground types, and Thunderbolt will beat the water types, where this fight goes exactly to plan. The guide wants me to use Lovely Kiss in the 5th fight to put my opponents to sleep, then use Psychic or Dig to win. Unfortunately, Lovely Kiss never ended up hitting, and Jinx went down quickly. Abra was there for backup, who took down Golbat, Seaking, and Haunter. Staryu is a great weapon in the 6th match against Tamer's ground types, but really is used to Hydro Pump the Ponyta and slowly Thunderbolt the Raticate. When Marowak came in, I was specifically told to use Jinx, who Ice Punched our way to the semis. This Ice Punch is very effective against all potential enemies in this battle, but after a crit takes Kadabra, Jinx goes down to Fearow. Jolteon was there for backup with Pin Missile, but Thunderbolt proved more important to take Fearow and Pidgeot in one go. The final against the Old Man had me use Jinx, Abra, and Staryu, with the biggest threat coming from Wigglytuff. Jinx took down Venomoth and got some damage in on Parasect before going down, and Abra came in to take him and Dragonair, and thanks to a no-show from Wigglytuff, the Great Ball Cup was won. The Ultra Ball team got some evolutions going with Kadabra and Starmie filling in for their pre-evolved forms. Plus Fearow and Dugong joined this time to replace Jinx and Persian, the latter who was not even used last round. Biker was again susceptible to Psychic as Kadabra took Machoke, Muck, and nearly Venomoth, but Starmie was there to clean this up. Now the guide didn't provide any actual guidance for the second battle other than having Psychic for Vileplume and Victreebel. Dugtrio felt like a good starter in case one of the 3 electric types came in, and luckily he went against Raichu and took him down. Then Kadabra came in to help out for the win. All of Juggler's Pokemon in round 3 have Metronome, so their moves will be a crapshoot. The guide only mentions Jolteon and Dugong, where Jolteon beat Primeape with 2 Thunderbolts, but can't quite hang on and loses to Gengar's Hypnosis and Dream Eater. I ended up using Kadabra as backup to Psychic Gengar and Mr. Mime to a win. Starmie is a matchup nightmare for Beauty's team of water and ground Pokemon with moves of Surf and Thunder. Dugong ends up double teaming a bunch, but Thunder eventually hits twice. Starmie then goes against himself and gets a crit with Thunder for a 1-hit KO. Dugtrio stood no chance against Surf. Okay, well Dugong barely survived a crit and hits his Surf for another win. Odds are at least one of my Pokemon will be hit with a Confuse Ray, but the guide again only asked for Starmie for the 2nd straight battle, which is who I started with. But once they threw out Gengar, I audible to Kadabra, who couldn't quite hang on. But the combo of Surf and Thunder were a potent combination, and Starmie fought through confusion to beat Gengar, Golbat, and Magmar. Tamer's team of slashes could be a problem, so I am guided to bring Kadabra, Starmie, and Jolteon. Persian was Tamer's chosen starter and gave Kadabra the work. I tried to toxic him away, but Slash is too strong and Persian just waxed me. I had one continue on hold, and this time Kingler was her chosen starter, who Kadabra got a huge crit on to take down. One slash from Sand Slash KO'd Kadabra, but Starmie was there to clean this up. Venusaur was bound to be a problem since Kadabra was supposed to be the main opposition according to the guide, and with Starmie gone, it was down to Jolteon. I went for a few sand attacks to prolong the fight as much as I could. A huge crit brought Venusaur within one hit, but they had the chance to end this run and cause a reset.
That's a miss.
A huge miss and a hit from me brings me to the semifinals. Dugong is the only Pokemon mentioned to bring against Psychic, but since this guide wants Thunderbolt, Starmie and Jolteon are backup. Dugong met up with Hypno, who used Hypnosis and Psychic to slowly take us down, but not after getting some damage in for Starmie to clean up. Scyther stood no chance against Thunder, but a crit from Aerodactyl's Hyper Beam beat Starmie, where Jolteon saved the day with a Thunderbolt while he recharged to bring us to the final with no continues. The old man's Dragonite, who was guaranteed to go in at some point, will be tough. I started with the best counter for him in Dugong, but Electrode came in first. I switched to Jolteon since this was the only one that might have a chance, and I got them to switch out after a few sand attacks. And in came the big boy, Dragonite, who Hyper Beamed Jolteon away. This did give me a free hit during the recharge with Dugong, and a big crit with Aurora Beam took him down, but Dugong did not stand a chance on Electrode. Starmie got paralyzed but snuck in a crit to beat this Electrode, and it was a 1v1 against
It's Pinsir.
who was just not the matchup we needed, especially while paralyzed. So after 45 minutes of battling, I lost and had to restart from the beginning. Again, I'm not going to share the details how I got back here, but I lost my second, third, and fourth attempts trying to get through. On my fifth attempt, I brought two continues into the final fight, where the first attempt didn't go well. The second try had the big Dugong Dragonite matchup to start, and after eating a Hyper Beam, two Aurora Beams were able to get the KO. Our speed got us a Surf hit on Flareon before going down, and Starmie cleaned this one up. It was a 2v1 against Pinsir. The first Thunder missed, and Slash gave me one more move with Starmie.
What's this? Power strike.
That was a massive moment, and I was on to the final Poke Cup, the Master Ball. The guide throws a change-up at this team, adding Sandslash, Gengar, Electrode, and Articuno to join Kadabra and Starmie. Again, the first matchup is great for Kadabra's Psychic, and while the guide doesn't guarantee a KO with Psychic, it's wrong, as 3 straight one-hitters get the win. The guide seems to think Rocker will send out Tangela first for Stun Spore, so obviously Electrode comes in. I sent out Kadabra since the guide thought Psychic would work against the Tangela, but I thought Dig would suffice for Electrode until they switched out for Zapdos, who beat Kadabra with Fly. Also, the guide had to have meant Sandslash instead of Sandshrew here, but it doesn't matter as they switched into the previous mentioned Tangela to beat Sandslash. Gengar was my anchor, but they switched to Electrode and I just got completely worked. I burned my Continue I got in the first round, but this didn't go any better and I had to try again. I returned with my Continue, but this time when they switched to Executor, I put in my Electrode for a self-destruct. From here, Kadabra took Venusaur with Psychic, and after decent damage on Tangela, Sandslash finished the job with Seismic Toss. It's another metronome game against the Juggler, but this time I had my own Gengar to put them to sleep. I switched for my Starmie as the guide told me once one of them was asleep, but Jinx got switched out for Gengar. I moved on to Kadabra, who fought through Hypnosis for the KO. Starmie came in for Magmar, who didn't stand a chance against Surf. Jinx was still asleep when she came in, and even after waking up, a Thunder crit got the job done. The guide wants Starmie out first for Surf and Thunderbolt, which isn't a move Starmie has. And coincidentally, we started this one with a Starmie off. The better Starmie won with a couple Thunders and a Swift. Rhydon stood no chance to Surf, and Gyarados went down to 2 Thunders for a Starmie sweep. Once again, the guide predicted the opponent would put a Pokemon out first, which in reality did not happen, but I still put my Gengar out there to deal with the pre-evolved Gengar. A few big confusion hits for the opponent basically took myself out. Starmie comes in for backup and takes out Haunter. Gengar does end up coming in for them, and after confusions, Thunders, and Surfs, this happens.
Good hit. What now? Special stat is down.
Ninetales came in, and a massive crit with Surf got the win. Tamer really likes Hyper Beam in this cup, but Gengar's Confuse Ray and Hypnosis are here to cause some problems. Except Confusion never actually hit Tauros, but thankfully Thunder missed enough for my Thunderbolt to win out. Confuse Ray does work on Vaporeon, so I get a crit with Thunderbolt, survive an Aurora Beam, and finish off with one more Thunderbolt. Confusion works on Rapidash also, and I switched out to Starmie to preserve the perfect fight. Electrode was a great lead against Psychic for its Thunder Wave and Thunder moves. They switched out right away to Executor, Executor, who I paralyzed. Articuno came in to beat up this Executor, and Electrode came back to thunderstorm me away with a crit, then get another crit on Charizard for another perfect battle. I brought 5 continues into the final battle of the Master Ball. Surely this couldn't go wrong. Electrode started to Thunder Wave the Dragonite that started against me. Then Articuno came in to one-hit him anyway. I brought Electrode back for another Thunder Wave, then Kadabra in for Dig, which really didn't do much, so I just used Psychic to get rid of him. Tauros was last, and Kadabra survived the strength just to counter back and bring home the final Poké Cup trophy. Our final Stadium Cup, or Cups, is the Prime Cup. Level 100 Pokemon only. This is the roof-shaking ultimate battle of the most powerful Pokemon. But the guide wants 0 fully evolved Pokemon in the Pokeball Cup with Pikachu, Voltorb, Diglett, Abra, Poliwhirl, and Weepinbell. On paper, this team doesn't stack up against Cue-Ball's bug types. Then again, the bugs don't fight particularly well. I started with Pikachu and kept Poliwhirl for the fire types, who I instantly switched into for Charmander. This was a bit of a switch off, but Pikachu eventually took Paris, Poliwhirl one-hit Charmander, and Voltorb beat Magikarp for the sweep. Abra starts against Rocket thanks to his 3 poison types and instantly took down Grimer. When Drowsy came in, Voltorb was needed for Thunder Wave and Thunderbolt to take it down before my Pokemon fell asleep. Ekans stood no chance against Abra, and after being in rap hell, Psychic hit for another perfect fight. Abra, Poliwhirl, and Diglett are the best combination for Judo Boy's team. Abra starts out since it can probably handle them all, but when Cubone starts for them, I had to follow the guide and switch to Poliwhirl to use Surf. I continued my Surfs against Kabuto, and Abra came in to beat up Rattata with a one-hit KO. Poliwhirl and the 2 Electrics should handle Gambler's crew, but when Nidoran came in, I used Surf instead of Psychic for some reason and led to a paralysis from Body Slam. Also, the Gambler's crew is terrifying since 5 out of the 6 have a one-hit KO move, so going first is very important. Nidoran went down, but Guillotine took down my Poliwhirl. Pikachu beat Krabby, and I had to take down Geodude with 2 electric Pokemon. Geodude metronomed Rage and increased his attack for every hit to beat the hell out of Pikachu and Voltorb for my first loss. On my second try, Poliwhirl tried to Ice Beam Goldeen because that's what I was told to do, but got horn drilled out of here. Voltorb came in to Thunderbolt him, Seal, and Nidoran to get the win. Once again, Poliwhirl and the Electrics are the best bet for Cool's team in round 5. Voltorb was switched in to deal with Horsey at the start, but Smokescreen was so annoying to deal with. Thunderbolt did eventually hit for a one-hit KO. Then Poliwhirl came back to Ice Beam Oddish, but he barely survived, and I got pedal danced out of here. Voltorb was fast enough to clean Oddish up. Eevee came in where 3 Thunderbolts brought home the win. The 6th match against Bird Boy was a great matchup for Abra and the 2 Electrics. Since there are 4 flying types, I started with Pikachu, and Abra came in for Bird Boy, but after paralyzing me, it just started teleporting for no reason, making this fight pretty easy. Doduo's Fury attack couldn't take out Pikachu, and Thunderbolt got the one-hitter, and it was the same thing for Spearow for a Pikachu sweep. The semifinal against Labman only has me bring Poliwhirl and Diglett, but I chose Pikachu as backup. Poliwhirl started since his attack should be good against 5 of the 6 Pokemon, and honestly, Psychic will probably do decent if Shelter comes in, which of course he does. I'm just gonna skip to the end on this one because it ended on a 1v2 with only Diglett, so I went for Fissure to have some fun. And hey, we got one! Clamp from Shelter put me in hell, so I lost anyways, but that was fun. Luckily, I brought some continues, and Dratini started this time. Now, the guide wants me to use Fissure and Earthquake against Dratini, even though Poliwhirl's Ice Beam would have been really nice here. But I switched to follow the guide, and once out of Wrap, Earthquake got the KO. Voltorb came in to deal with Tentacool and knock him out. Bellsprout was last, and I Thunder Waved him to slow him down, then switched out for Poliwhirl, which was probably a mistake, as I should have just eaten it with Voltorb. I got a Psychic in, don't know why I didn't use Ice Beam, and Wrapped looked to be finishing me off.
Paralyzed on the spot.
The paralysis worked. What a massive moment for one more Psychic, and we are on to the finals. I started with Poliwhirl, with Diglett and one of the Electrics here for backup. After the great switch off to start the battle, Earthquake from Diglett got a big crit on the Slowpoke, so I decided to risk it and stick with him for one more, which worked out. Meowth came in, and there was no reason to switch now as Earthquake 2-hit Meowth and easily beat Magnemite for the first Prime Cup trophy. Now on to the Great Ball. Pikachu remained on the team and was joined by Electabuzz, Kadabra, Magmar, Dugong, and Dugtrio. Against Cue-Ball, if we start out with Dugong, we should have no trouble beating anything thrown at us. And even though a Spore put Dugong to sleep, he woke up immediately and Aurora Beam past Parasect, surfed the Charmeleon, and Aurora Beam the Jigglypuff for a solo sweep. When going against Rocket's poisonous crew, Kadabra is our ace in the hole, with Pikachu as backup. Kadabra's Dig didn't do much against Sandshrew, but Psychic rocked him for the KO. Pikachu came in for Poliwhirl, and I switched back to Kadabra when Nidorina came in, but instantly lost to a Body Slam. Slam. Since the guy didn't give me a third option, I went with Dugong, who came in for the win. Kadabra will be the key to an easy victory against Judo Boy, and after he switched out Machoke for Raichu, Psychic did enough damage on the switch for me to leave him in for the KO. After this, Hitmonlee and Machoke didn't stand a chance. Kadabra again is important in the fourth battle against the Gambler, whose team once again is heavy with one-hit KO moves. It didn't matter as Kadabra made quick work of Nidorino, Kingler, and Clefairy for an easy sweep. The fifth battle against the female Cool had me sandwich Magmar between the two electric types. Electabuzz got the start, but switched for Magmar when they put in Weepin' Bell. Fire Punch knocked him out, and Electabuzz came back in to handle Seadra. I switched in Pikachu to go for a perfect game in the extra continue against Wartortle, but Thunderbolt couldn't quite do enough, so Electabuzz came in to clean this up. Magmar and Pikachu should excel against Bird Boy's combination. Bird Boy quickly switched to Gyarados, causing my switch to Pikachu, who ate a Surf to Thunderbolt Gyarados out of here. Thunderbolt couldn't quite beat Fearow, but since the guy didn't provide a third option, I went for the other electric Pokemon in Electabuzz to clean him up and knock out the Pidgeotto. Magmar and the electric type start in the semifinal, and since they will use Recover, Thunder Wave is key to stay in the battle. Pikachu got a Thunder Wave off on Venusaur before switching for Magmar to get the KO. Magmar stayed in for Execute and got Toxic before getting this knockout. Chansey came in for their anchor, and holy hell, that's a ton of HP. Magmar got a Confuse Ray in before a switch for Electabuzz and its Thunder Wave. Chansey put me in the Thunderdome thanks to Soft Boiled, where I just couldn't do enough damage before she healed herself, and Poison led to my first loss. On the second try, Pikachu beat Staryu with a crit, then Magmar came in for Execute. Thankfully, Porygon came in this time instead of Chansey, and he didn't use Recover for a while for this massive crit to take him out. Dugong's Surf is essential in the final against the male Cool, who got a couple Surfs in to take down Moltres. Dugtrio got switched in for Magneton, which then started a great switch off. There was 9 straight switches when I hit my breaking point and accepted my fate, going for sand attacks with Dugtrio and even getting a miss out of it. Aurora Beam did eventually hit and take me out. Thinking they were going to switch anyways, I went with Dugong to change things up a bit, but Cloyster stayed in to confuse me. The previous sand attacks helped with a missed Surf, but he eventually switched when I went for the big one.
Whoa! Andre!
What a moment for Horndrill on Magneton. And once Dugong basically took itself out, there was no switching now as Electabuzz came in and brought home the Great Ball win. Dugong returned for the Ultra Ball Cup, joined by Charizard, Dugtrio, Kadabra, Electrode, and Gengar. Dugong and Charizard are naturals against Cue Ball's fire and bug types. Dugong Aurora Beam Butterfree then got paralyzed 3 times in a row until knocking out Venomoth. Dugong took a dig to use Surf on Arcanine, then switched into Charizard to fly to victory. Dugtrio, Dugong, and Kadabra are the chosen squad against Rocket, with Dugtrio going first with Dig and Rock Slide. Nidoqueen snuck in a Toxic between 2 digs to knock her out. Then Kadabra came in to avoid a Hydro Pump from Almastar. Dig from Kadabra didn't do much, so I went with Psychic to KO Almastar and brought in Dugong for Onix in a perfect fight. Kadabra gets a start against Judo Boyd, and the guide is right that I didn't even need a second Pokemon here. Psychic got a crit on Raticate, nearly took out Poliwrath until Submission's Recoil took him out, and one-hit KO'd Hitmonchan. Dugong and Electrode put the odds in my favor against the Gambler, with Kadabra as a good backup. This fight was a mess, and while getting a ton of damage in on Rapidash and Dugong, they hit 2 Horn Drills, leaving me with just Electrode. Luckily here they switched to Clefable where 2 Thunders took her out, where I could then Swift Rapidash and Dugong away thanks to their low HPs. Order is important against the female Cool, with Electrode getting the start with Charizard and Dugong as backup. Now my first attempt resulted in a loss, but on my second try, Rhydon beat Charizard early and I was behind the fight, meaning I went for Old Faithful.
Whoa! Andre! That was brutal!
Aurora Beam was useful for Victreebel, who thankfully missed a Razor Leaf, allowing Dugong to get the KO. Rhydon came back, but a crit with Surf was enough for the win. The guy doesn't give exact Pokemon to choose against Bird Boy, but just wants some combination of electric, water, and ghost attacks. I started with Electrode, who one-hit KO'd Dodrio. I used Thunder Wave to slow down Zapdos, then got a crit with Thunder for some big damage. I went for Swift at the end thinking it would KO, but when it didn't, Zapdos got a crit back to knock out Electrode. Dugong beat Zapdos, and Pidgeot's Fly did not do enough damage as 2 Aurora Beams brought home the win. The guide against Labman says that he won't make many mistakes in the battle, so I should try to make 0 mistakes also. Now the guide only says to use Charizard for the final opponent and to have Electrode if in a pinch, so I started with Kadabra since I wasn't sure what else to do. Dig was able to take down Electabuzz, and once Executor was brought in, I switched to Charizard to use Fire Blast for the KO. Kadabra came back in for Dugtrio, who got a massive crit for the win. I went into the final fight with 3 continues, where a versatile team is necessary against Cool's varied Pokemon. The only two required for me are Gengar and Dugtrio, so I started Dugong in case I needed to use Horn Drill. The first fight resulted in a loss after Gengar couldn't put Jolteon to sleep, and the second fight had a moment for Horn Drill to get the win but missed. Now on the third attempt, 2 Rock Slides from Dugtrio knocked out Aerodactyl. I brought Dugong in for Snorlax since he really is the only one that can handle him, and after the first Horn Drill missed, I was down to one last chance.
That was brutal!
Dugong went down honorably against Jolteon, and Dugtrio came back in to dig our way to the Ultra Ball victory. The final Stadium Cup is the Master Ball difficulty of the Prime Cup, and this guide wants the team of Dugtrio, Arcanine, Kadabra, Dugong, Electrode, and Executor. Q-Ball's Bug and Fire type should be a good matchup for Arcanine and Dugong. Arcanine dealt with Beedrill quickly for Kangaskhan to come in, who the models did not have in mind. A few missed Fire Blasts led to an Earthquake KO. Thunder also missed, and this quickly got out of hand for an early loss once the Horn Drill game did not work. But this reset isn't so bad, and on the second try, Arcanine beat Beedrill, Dugong took Flareon with Surf, and Arcanine came back for Fire Blast in the perfect battle. Arcanine and Dugong lead the way for the second fight, where Dugong's Aurora Beam worked great on Golbat. I was given the choice between Dugtrio and Kadabra, and I went for the Psychic type for a switch. But Persian Screech for a defense decrease into Hyper Beam was so strong and got the one hit. Dugong ate a Hyper Beam and got 2 Surfs in to get rid of Persian. Now the guide mentions Victreebel, Golem, Aerodactyl, Persian, and Golbat when deciding who was on the team. So naturally, the last matchup was against the forgotten about Jinx. Luckily, Arcanine was a great final matchup and we moved on. Kadabra matches up well against most of Judo Boy's Pokemon, but will get hammered if trying to ride out the battle with Psychic, where Dugtrio's Dig should be useful. Dugtrio ate a crit on Takedown and used Dig to get rid of Jolteon. I switched in for Kadabra against Machamp, who just can't knock him out and gets beaten by the Focus Energy Dig. I then walked into a very unfortunate Dig situation where Arcanine was going first, where a second crit knocked out Arcanine. Machamp got taken out, and I realistically needed a crit from Dig to get the win.
Vigorous attack. Nail the weak spot.
So close. But I had to continue, and this time was a breeze as Kadabra got the clean sweep against Primeape, Hitmonlee, and Machamp. Dugong, Kadabra, and Electrode come in against the Gambler, but we know what can happen here. And if you want a reminder, look no further than the first turn.
That was brutal.
Kadabra had to come in, and thankfully Body Slam didn't paralyze and Fissure didn't hit to take Dugtrio. Tauros beat Kadabra, and Electrode Speed and a Thunder crit took him down. Blastoise was last, where Thunder got a few big hits in for the win. Changing our Pokemon in the 5th battle will wear us down quickly. A Solar Beam from Executor got the one-hit KO after he took a Hyper Beam. I switched out for Arcanine to take their Executor, and a couple Fire Blasts knocked him out. I brought my Executor back out when Starmie came in, and another Solar Beam got the one-hit win. Bird Boy's Pokemon will make your life miserable until you neutralize them with Thunder Wave. Electrode started first, but a Hyper Beam crit posed some problems. 2 Aurora Beams took Pidgeot out, but not having Electrode at this point is a death sentence, as my backup of Dugtrio got dominated by Articuno, and Horn Drill didn't hit for my miracle comeback. The second attempt went much better, since Moltres got paralyzed from the start and went down after a couple Thunders. I got in a Thunder Wave on Zapdos before switching for Dugtrio's Rock Slide, which was terrible. But Dugong was there to take Zapdos, and I kept him in against Articuno to grind out a win with multiple Aurora Beams. Once again, Electrode's Thunder Wave is invaluable in the semifinal against Labman, and Dugtrio and Kadabra joined for any help. The first try resulted in a loss once Kadabra overslept, but luckily I had one continue going into this, so I had one final chance. This time, Dugtrio came in after Raichu got Thunder Waved, but they switched in for Lapras as I got in a crit with Dig. But when I switched into Electrode, this happened.
There's the attack. Oh, it's frozen solid.
Electrode was done at this point, and I brought in Dugtrio to dig against Alakazam when
Vigorous attack. Nail the weak spot.
a huge crit brought me back in as I stuck with Dugtrio against Lapras to try and get some damage in. Once out, Kadabra took Lapras, and it was down to a 1v1 against a paralyzed Raichu, who went for Thunder Wave, which really worked out in their favor. 2 straight paralyses and a crit left me with one chance to win. All of that just to go to the final battle with no continues. Is this destiny? No. It's not. Electrode, Dugong, and Kadabra were the chosen team, but Snorlax worked Electrode, and Mew easily worked through Kadabra and Dugong as Horn Drill missed. This entire gauntlet took an hour, and I was back at the beginning. Again, I won't go through the details of how I got back here, but my 3rd attempt lost on the 5th fight, and on my 4th attempt, I got double fissured by the Gambler in the 4th round. But thankfully, I had to continue to keep me going, and it was on this run that I got to the final fight with 2 continues. The first attempt was just terrible when Dugong got crit immediately, but the second try was Electrode Electrode versus Electrode to start, where we both got Thunder Waves on each other. And as we decided to stick it out, I got 2 massive paralyses, which then caused a switch into Mew right into a Thunder crit. Electrode came up huge and KO'd the Mew, but went down in glory to Cloyster. Kadabra's Psychic took 2 hits to KO, and thankfully they went for Toxic instead of damage. The paralyzed Electrode stood no chance at this point, and one last Psychic got me the Prime Cup Master Ball trophy and completed the Stadium section. At this point, I was 12.5 hours into this game, and I was finally onto the Gym Leader Castle. Now, each Gym Leader has 3 lead-up fights before you have the chance to battle them, and there are no continues given for a perfect fight. And listen, a lot of these fights were trivial, so I'm gonna speed through this a bit. The Pewter Gym had Charmander, Wartortle, Growlithe, Abra, Weepinbell, and Voltorb for a team. Charmander swept through Bug Boy in round 1 and got some help from Abra in the second fight. Weepinbell got the easy sweep in the third fight, and we were already on to Brock. Bind was particularly annoying, but once it finally missed, Wartortle easily swept through the rest for the Pewter badge. Misty's Cerulean Gym had me bring Kadabra, Weepinbell, Voltorb, Staryu, Hitmonlee, and Vaporeon. Voltorb does enough in the first fight to knock out 2 of the 3, so Staryu could clean it up. Voltorb took Seadra to start the second battle, but the Jig knocked him out. Kadabra and Weepinbell cleaned this up, and Weepinbell and Hitmonlee won the third battle. For Misty, Voltorb, Weepinbell, and Staryu are the best options, but they aren't all needed as Voltorb gets the crit on Blastoise, 2 hits on Starmie, and Staryu's Thunderbolt beat up Psyduck for the Cerulean badge. Sandshrew, Dugtrio, Gengar, Electrode, Cubone, and Dragonite make up the team for the Vermilion Gym. Shellder was hyped up in the first battle, but he no-showed as Electrode got the sweep. Dugtrio then swept the second fight, and Dragonite won the third one with its Surf. Surge's team of Electric stood no chance against Dugtrio. Hell, even Electrode resorted to Seppuku rather than getting dug to death, and we had the Vermilion badge. The Celadon Gym was met up with Kadabra, Electabuzz, Dugong, Flareon, Hitmonlee, and Mr. Mime. Last's Pokemon in the first fight were supposed to be no match for Hitmonlee, but Paris was able to take him out with a combo of Spore and Slash. Luckily, Flareon was there to clean this up. The second fight had Dugong, Kadabra, and Electabuzz all work for the win. The third fight got a bit scary as Chansey did some work, but once Dugong woke up, it was all over. Now, these fights were actually harder than Erica, the gym leader, who got burnt to a crisp with Flareon. The Fuchsia Gym wants a team of Dugtrio, Kadabra, Cloyster, Gengar, Electrode, and Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime got an easy solo win in the first fight, then Gengar was a great lead thanks to the guide and got an easy sweep with Thunderbolt, Hypnosis, and Dream Eater. Hypnosis continued to be big in the third fight and also against gym leader Koga for 3 straight sweeps and the Fuchsia badge. The Saffron Gym actually got a little interesting with the team of Dugtrio, Kadabra, Electrode, Ammonite, Flareon, and Dragonite. The first 2 fights were easy, but the third fight against Medium did not go so hot once Electrode either missed Thunder or did no damage when he was supposed to sweep, so we ran it back from the top, and when returning to the third battle, Electrode's Thunder beat Ghastly, did some decent damage on Tentacruel where Kadabra and Flareon could clean this up. I led with Electrode in the final, but quickly switched to Flareon to Fire Blast, Executor, and the Hypno, but went down to Toxic and Leech Seed while Alakazam was in the middle of Dig. Ammonite and Electrode were my only 2 options, both being weak to Dig. Ammonite went in to tank the hit and get some damage in with Blizzard. It was Electrode versus Alakazam when this insane luck happened.
Here it comes! Thunder! There, it's a hit! It's paralyzed on the spot!
Listen, I'm gonna take it, and I was on to Cinnabar. The 7th gym required the team of Gengar, Electrode, Kingler, Mr. Mime, Vaporeon, and Snorlax. Mr. Mime swept the first battle. Gengar was useless in the second fight, but Snorlax and Electrode saved the day thanks to a good final matchup against Starmie. The guide in the third match mentions to bring 4 Pokemon, which just isn't allowed, but it was correct that the first 2 on Nerd's team did self-destruct. Snorlax was able to survive the first attempt, and Golem tried to sneak in a dig on my low HP, allowing me to wrest it back and leading to the second self-destruct. Electrode took Cloyster with a Thunder, and we were on to Blaine. Vaporeon and Kingler are naturals to fight against his fire types, and Vaporeon is meant as the anchor. Crabhammer almost KOs Charizard, leading to a switch, and I switched into Electrode to follow the guide and self-destruct to take out the normal type. From here, Kingler nearly went down to a crit from Charizard, but then took him down. Vaporeon came in as the anchor and only needed 1 Surf for the Cinnabar badge. The Viridian Gym uses a team of Kangaskhan, Gengar, Electrode, Dragonair, Alakazam, and Starmie. Gengar did some big damage for Starmie to clean up the win against Dodrio. Electrode took the first 2 in the next fight, and I tried to self-destruct for the win, but it didn't quite work. Starmie was there as backup. Electrode, Gengar, and Dragonair easily won the third battle. The last gym leader is Giovanni, where I brought in Dragonair to start. I admittedly got lucky when Blizzard missed 3 separate times so Dragonair could take out Tauros with Hyper Beam. Dragonair snuck in a Thunder Wave and Hyper Beam before going down, where Gengar could come in for the KO. Gengar got worked by Dugtrio, and it was down to Starmie to bring home the win.
Bumblebee! Whoa! That's tough!
The crit gets us through and we are onto the Elite Four. This mini gauntlet consists of 4 of the best Pokemon trainers in the world, specializing in some of the toughest types of Pokemon to defeat. The team recommended here consists of Gengar, Dragonair, Staryu, Jolteon, Scyther, and Electrode. The first member is Lorelei, who consists mainly of water and ice type Pokemon. Electric type power is recommended here, starting with Jolteon, who made quick work of Slowbro. A Thunder did great damage on Jinx before this happened.
What now? Oh, it's frozen!
With Jolteon gone, Electrode came in for a hit on Lapras before getting paralyzed from Body Slam. Electrode hung on from a Blizzard hit and got the KO. Jinx went for a Thrash, which ended up being her downfall since my last Pokemon was Gengar, a Pokemon that cannot be hit by this move. 2 Thunderbolts later, and we were through Lorelei. Next up is Bruno, and Gengar is our lead for Hypnosis and Dream Eater, while Scyther and Staryu were there for backup. It took a couple turns, but Hypnosis finally hit Machamp, and Dream Eater did enough for Thunderbolt to KO on the next turn. Gengar then put Rhydon to sleep before they switched out for Hitmonchan. Unfortunately, Hypnosis never got the hit here, and Gengar got taken down. Scyther's wing attack worked wonders on the fighting type. Well, kind of at least. It didn't do great damage, but hey, it was enough for the KO. And when Rhydon came in still asleep, this gave me a free switch to Staryu to beat Bruno with the Surf. Staryu stays out as the lead against Agatha to make a shocking entrance. Scyther and Jolteon were the chosen backup and were needed since Staryu didn't really do a lot against Gengar, even with a super effective Psychic. Scyther came in, leading to a switch from Gengar to Haunter. Wing attack was decent enough to nearly KO with a crit, and Scyther held on to a Thunderbolt to KO Haunter. Gengar cleaned this up, and Jolteon was last and fast enough to KO with Thunder. It was a 1v1 against Muck, which isn't the worst matchup. Thunder did good damage from the start, and Sludge did not do enough to 2-hit. So without any crits, I had 2 Thunder chances to get the win, and missed them both. So we go again from the start, where Jolteon and Gengar swept the first 2 away. And when I returned to Agatha, Staryu got beat easily by Venusaur. Scyther came in and avoided a Toxic while KOing with Wing Attack. Scyther also beat Arbok and did more than enough damage on Golbat before going down so Jolteon could get the win. Now on to Lance. The team of Gengar, Jolteon, and Staryu are here to spark a victory. Gengar gets a start since Hypnosis and Confuse Ray are always good, but this combo didn't exactly work. So I stuck with Confuse Ray and Thunderbolt since Ice Beam wasn't doing a ton of damage. A timely paralysis and not enough confusion hits led to Gengar's demise. Jolteon takes Dragonair, but Kangaskhan takes down Jolteon with Earthquake, and from here it was easy cleanup for Kangaskhan and I had to start again. My 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th attempts all went bad. The 7th attempt got back to Lance, but this time I switched it up and led with Jolteon. I got the starting matchup against Kangaskhan, got a hit with Thunder, survived an Earthquake, and got a double kick in to beat him up. Jolteon hit a big Thunder on Lapras before going down, and Gengar came in to easily take him down. Aerodactyl was last, but his fly couldn't do enough on 2 hits, and he was too susceptible to Thunderbolt for an easy win. With Lance down, there was still one more secret fight to get through, the rival. Now his team in the game can vary depending on if you are renting Pokemon or if you are playing with Pokemon from either a red, blue, or yellow cartridge. But since rentals are our only option, his chosen team is Type A. The guide gives no help on who to bring, only saying diversity is always the way to tackle diverse opponents. I started with Jolteon since, I don't know, it worked in the last fight, so why not? It didn't work in this one as I kept him in against Electabuzz and he kept missing Thunders. After his KO, I had to go for Fire Blast with Dragonair, which simply stunk. Thunderbolt was far worse and couldn't even get the KO with 19 HP left. And yeah, it was basically over at this point. The rest of the fight was a disaster, and alas, I was back at the beginning of the Elite Four. The 8th and 9th attempts both lost to Lance, but on my 10th try, I got through for my 2nd bout with the rival. Gengar got the start this time to go against his counterpart Clefable. An early paralysis came up big, but ultimately Clefable and Gengar traded KOs. Jolteon came out next for me and went against Pinsir when this happened.
And the weak spot.
Well, I didn't hate that. I toxic to Electabuzz, and all I had to do was survive long enough for it to take him down. Another nice crit with Thunder brought him down to his last stand, where Electabuzz had no chance, and I had taken down the Elite Four. Now, when the Gym Leader Castle and the Stadium are both completed, you get the chance to fight against Mewtwo in a 6v1 battle. It sounds a lot easier than it is, since he can rest at any moment. The recommended team the guide wants is Electrode, Ditto, Fearow, Cloyster, Mr. Mime, and Magneton. I started with Electrode to paralyze him, then went for Flash since lowering his accuracy can't be a bad thing. I then brought in Ditto as the guide suggested and used Blizzard, which didn't always hit. Then Mewtwo rested to gain HP and cure itself of paralysis. Blizzard got him down to around half HP when he woke up, and we both had a few misses afterwards. Since Blizzard was out of PP, Thunderbolt was the move of choice to get him down to 71 HP. Now I don't know why he didn't rest here, maybe he hoped he would survive one more, but a crit from us got the win in the end of Pokemon Stadium. Well, actually, that's not true. See, once Mewtwo falls, you actually unlock round 2, where I will directly quote from the guide to describe. Round 2 is extremely hard, with harsher schedules and intelligent trainers loaded with much stronger Pokemon. You'll need luck to win, but you'll have to be downright charmed if you hope to win with an all-rental team. And just for some context, round 1 took roughly 19 hours for me to complete. Round 2 took around 100 hours. Hell, just the next Stadium Cup took over 10 hours alone. How could that happen? Well, you'll have to find out next time for round 2 because this is just taking far too long to edit.